Hello adventurers, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm super excited because we're going to take a tour of downtown Prescott. This is the historic square with Whiskey Row right over here. I'm going to show you some of the sights and also things you can do here, and then we are going to check out a few little historic facts that you can find. This is going to be super fun and you guys are coming with me. Let's go. Prescott of Yavapai County is considered the county seat, and it was founded in 1864 on Granite Creek. It was named for William Hickling Prescott, a historian and the first governor of the area. Prescott was considered an appointee of Abraham Lincoln and established the first territorial capital of Arizona here. The governor's mansion was located only 2 short blocks away to the west. The first legislature met July 18, 1864, and this was also the site of the first grade school in Arizona. Now, one of Prescott's claims to fame is having the world's oldest rodeo. And in fact, we learned at the Museum for Indigenous People that that museum was actually constructed to help save the rodeo during some tough times for the community. So all of the different pieces historically around Prescott work together to tell a bigger story, including the many statues you will find here at the Yavapai Courthouse. The historic Yavapai County Courthouse Plaza Fountain, it was actually brought here from New York on July 13th, 1910, and it graced the courthouse plaza for more than 60 years. Over time, the fountain began to show signs of wear and tear, and in 1976, it was removed and placed in storage at Charlotte Hall Museum. In 2016, the centennial of the laying of the cornerstone for the courthouse was approaching, and they wanted to do something special, so they actually brought out the fountain to do the restoration. And here you can find that the restoration has continued with this fountain and its unique placement right here at the cornerstone of this area. Here you will find this beautiful, long, tall structure that they have actually started working on once again. Now, during the winter months, they do close it off because it gets too cold and they don't want to have any problems. But this is kind of what it looks like. During the summer months, you can see it flowing and shining and telling the stories of its history. Here you will also find the statehood tree, which was planted way back in 1912. This monument was presented later on in the 60s by the Cub Scouts, but it marks the statehood tree, which shines bright amongst the landscape of the courthouse. In addition to the statehood tree, they also have the centennial tree, which was planted on February 14th, 2012. Now, in addition to various points of history that you'll find throughout telling about the statehood and the statehood tree and the courthouse itself, you'll also find memorials and monuments around this area to echo the faces of this community. Like this one right here that we find, that's actually a memorial to those who served in both World War I, World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Persian Gulf, and the Global War on Terror. This is just a small statue that shows all of the different names from those who were in active service and who sacrificed the ultimate sacrifice from Yavapai County. It's a beautiful way to reflect on them and honor them in such a central place, especially considering that Prescott has a large tourism population that comes in all the time. So there's an influx of people who are seeing this. So to constantly be honoring these humans is huge. But there's another one actually for the fallen officers, and this one was kind of sad because there are a lot of different fallen officers from the Yavapai County area, and you can find all of them at the corner point of the area by where I parked, kind of closer to the centennial tree and also closer to the founder's tree. So it's really interesting to see each and every one of these names highlighted. But there's a few other things that I want to touch on before we head back and check out Whiskey Row over here. Now, to understand Prescott, you must understand the history of this area a little bit more. They built their backbone on ranching, and because of that, there's a special thing here that actually honors ranchers. It was put here in the 90s, and it's a beautiful piece that flanks the opposite side of the courthouse. So around the courthouse, you'll find all of the traditional values of a typical courthouse, but you'll also find the backbone of the community as told by the various pieces around. around. And I think that that's what makes this area so cool. Not only is it a great place to come if you're wanting to get away for a day and see something a little bit different in the higher country, but also it is nice because they reflect their overall history in a lot of different places. Now, in addition to talking about their history, they also tell you about some of the different things that you could find in this area and a little bit more about the water table. Now, by March of 1881, fire wells like this one were actually built in the four corners of the courthouse. And at the time, the water table was high enough to allow for bucketing for emergencies. In other words, they would use a bucket brigade if they had to break out in case of a fire. However, all of these were actually abandoned by July 14th of 1900. You can see on this map where we are exactly, and then also the parameters of the boundary for the watershed. And it far exceeds the downtown area. In fact, going way out to Willow Lake Reservoir, almost out to the Granite Basin Lake Reservoir, and you can see all of the little contributors which would contribute to the overall watershed in this area. Now, the well that we were just talking about looks like this today. It's just what looks like a little hole that's been graded over, but they left this here for historic purpose of us seeing it, but also so they can still access it if they need to, because it is a portion of the infrastructure. However, one of the things that I have noticed about this little sign over here that it explains a bit more in detail is, to the higher water table, the lushness of this area is definitely echoed. You can see thriving trees in this region. You can also see grass everywhere, and the high water table contributes to a lot of the different kinds of things that are in this area when it comes to the wildlife and nature. So in this region where I was actually camping, you could see skunks and raccoons and bears and deer, and all of these things are thriving because they have this abundance of this resource. And I think that that's really cool. So I love that they have not only talked about that here, but also showed us the implementation and some of the areas for which they get some of that fresh water and what makes that water table so high. So that's pretty neat. Now, they do have a couple of other references around here also, leading you to other sites that you can find a little bit more of a deep dive of history, including the Charlotte Hall Museum, which I'm hoping to go to this coming weekend. I'm really excited about that one. Now, on the opposite side from those who have fallen, we find those who have served. And this is a complete listing of all of the veterans who have served from this area. And this is at the service flag. Hoisted high above this monument right here, we find the American flag flying in the breeze. We also find the first cowboy sculpture. From 1868 to 1922, the free-spirited son of the West was sensitive to the changing era which he lived in, and he portrayed Western art through a unique way using marble and bronze. It was interesting to find this one because the Bucky O'Neill Monument bronze is amongst his greatest works. In fact, Bucky here is something that has been in the Prescott area since 1982. He was dedicated on June 6, 1982, and has been gracing the square ever since. And his placement is awesome, absolutely awesome. During the weekends, they actually line this area with flags, Arizona flags, and you can walk through here in a grand way. And also, right below at our feet, always look high, always look low, because there's an entire timeline of Arizona history. Here we stand just below the Plaza Bandstand. As early as 1965, Lucien Bonaparte Jewel organized the brass band in Prescott. But by the 1870s, the regimental bands from Fort Whipple began to dominate the local music scene. Interestingly enough, we learned that this was actually used a lot of times, but its grand inauguration was actually whenever they played All Hail the Chief to the new governor of the territory. And it was really cool because they brought out all of the pomp and circumstances. This place was completely surrounded, and you can find historic photos of this also at Charlotte Hall. So we're definitely going to have to go there and see some of these pictures because they say that it was an exceptional display. I can't wait to hear more. Okay guys, we've crossed right across the road to Whiskey Row, and here we will find shopping, historic stops, and more. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this as we take a look around. Came through the historic walkway, and there's a variety of different kinds of shops down here that are absolutely magnificent, but also you can look along the walls and see some of these pieces from the past, which are so cool. And so it's a really neat way to kind of explore, and you never know what you're going to find here in Prescott. Keep your eyes open always, because around every twist and turn there might be something cool. Now here we learn about the Palace Saloon, and the exact age of the palace is something of a puzzle according to this. It says here that they have documentation from an item from September 21st, 1877 in Arizona Weekly that said that this was a miner's haven basically. Now in 1883 a fire destroyed most of the row, which was Whiskey Row, including the palace, and they rebuilt using brick with a stone foundation and an iron roof. So it was considered to be one of the places that could never go away. It's pretty interesting to see this structure now because it looks as it did in this historic photo right here. Why is that interesting though? Well, because they had another fire in 1900 and a lot of Prescott burned down, but the palace, it remained because they used different construction materials, and it set a trend going forward for many of the other businesses in the area to also do so. Now I found that in other mining towns this also would happen because fires would break out and it would decimate the entire community. So they started to build back differently, and in doing so they used fireproof materials, and that really changed the way that construction was done way back in those Western days. So it's kind of interesting to see this, but there's a couple other facts here I'm going to leave for you guys, and let's learn a little bit more about Whiskey Row now. Here we find out in this plaque that was set here by the Arizona Historical Society that Whiskey Row was full block of saloons, gambling halls, hotels, and it was considered one of the wildest parts of town. Some of the saloons brewed their own beer, and most drinks were sold for 12.5 cents each. I think you can see, even though it's called Whiskey Row, it's not just whiskey now. There's all sorts of different places you can go to eat, you can go to shop. It is still a part of the community and a part of the community center, and it's located right across from the courthouse, which made for some interesting things, I'm sure, way back in the day. But let's go check out the palace a little bit more because they have a couple special displays that I really was interested in, and I think you guys will be too. Now you can see some of the patrons of this place include Big Nose Kate, Wyatt Earp, and Virgil Earp, and then also Doc Holliday, who we've actually been to see his grave. Something I found kind of interesting over at the square, there are signs of marked events that the celebrated in the community. But here on Whiskey Row, they have their own set of events, and there's a QR code here that you can scan over and find out what's coming up, who's performing. And then you'll see areas like this that have open staging areas. So lots of live music here, especially during the summer months. Don't miss that. I'm here a little bit on an off day. I'm here at the beginning of the week, but on the weekends, you can hear the music permeating from all of the different locations here on Whiskey Row, and it's pretty cool. And as you can see, the National Registry of Historic Places, many of the buildings along Whiskey Row have all been named to this. And I think that that's just a testament to the preservation of this area. You know, a lot of times whenever we come to areas that have a historic past, times might have changed a little bit for them, and they've fallen on poor times, which means that not as many people are coming there, and some of the buildings go into disrepair. However, here in Prescott, they have preserved these places for us to still have experiences there. So the stories from the past can meld with the stories of today and tell the stories to the generations to come. And I think that that's really cool. So this right here is actually the Grand Highland Hotel, and this is another historic building. And you can actually still stay here, which is kind of cool. Uh-oh guys, we missed the Western Heritage Center. It is open from Wednesday to Saturday from 10 till 5 and 12 till 4 on Sundays, but Mondays and Tuesdays when I'm here, it's closed. So maybe we'll come back to here a little bit later in the week if we're still in town, but this one looks like a good one. Let me show you. And they do also have a QR code, so this is one that we can scan and learn a little bit more about, even if we can't visit. Again, that's why I think those QRs are just so important, because even though they're not open, we can still learn about the place through them. And I think that that is brilliant, because a lot of times people don't necessarily know the hours whenever they're just taking a spontaneous trip. Now, I do try to research things, but I knew I was going to be here earlier in the week, so I knew that that was just going to be the sacrifice I had to make. But you guys don't have to. You can learn a little bit more ahead of time and go there during the open hours and just have so many brain wrinkles. It just looks really neat. A little nugget along the way, this is Montezuma Street, and this is the 100 block of South Montezuma Street, and it says that it has long been known as Whiskey Row because of the numerous saloons, but it actually started out as Montezuma Street, which is kind of interesting. It goes on to tell a little bit more of the history here, saying that on July 14th, 1900, this block was totally destroyed by the fire. Within a few days of the fire, new construction was underway with brick and masonry, like we were talking about. Most of the buildings on this block were constructed between the fall of 1900 and 1905. Something else I noticed was that I kept saying Sam Hill, and I didn't know why, but I knew that there was a phrase, what in Sam Hill is this? It actually stems from Sam Hill hardware here in this area, according to what I'm finding. That is just wild. There was a hardware store that was actually reconstructed during this time, and it kind of marks the line along Whiskey Row here. It's just fascinating. But there's one other thing that I thought was kind of interesting, something called Sam's Crossing, which is this crossing right here. Not related to necessarily the original Sam Hill. In fact, Sam's Crossing is actually a crosswalk that is dedicated in the memory of a longtime Prescott resident, Sam Steger. And he served the citizens of this area as a part of the state senate and was a representative in Congress and also the mayor of Prescott. And so this is dedicated in his honor. Interestingly enough, when I was watching a couple things about this area, I learned about this crosswalk. And somebody said that he came out in the middle of the night and he drew the crosswalk, and that is why there's a crosswalk there. I'm not sure if that is actual and factual, but that is what I saw on the internet, and if so, that is just wild to know that he made this particular crosswalk happen, and then they kept it in place in his honor because it was the fastest path from one side to the next to get over to the courthouse. Kind of interesting, but there's one more sign I want to show you guys before we head back to the van. It is this sign right here that talks about Prescott's beginnings, first mining district in Yavapai County. In fact, the city of Prescott had its beginning in the spring of 1863 when a party of explorers would go on to be able to find something interesting in this area. And in doing so, it sprang up this settlement. Now there's a lot of information on this sign, and I do encourage you guys to stop and read this because it's some great context. But also the interconnecting museums around Prescott, we'll go into a little bit more detail of this. So I'm going to leave this one for you guys as you're walking around, but just know there's some really cool history on this one sign that is nestled at the Sam's Crosswalk in this little bush area. Thanks guys for coming along with me today to explore a little bit of historic Prescott. It has been wild to see all of the interesting connections that they have, and really fun to be able to put together some of the pieces as to how the history of Prescott has unfolded before us. Now I'm going to be sharing a few other things here in the Prescott area that I think you'd be interested in, so buckle up. We have some fun to explore. Remember guys, we're not here for a long time, but we are here for a good time, and places like this with free adventures like this are definitely that. Till next time guys, bye!